incident record system. And of course, there will be a special system that would enable our citizens to participate exclusively in the digital form. And I would say one final message in the end. I know that my respectable colleagues are going to speak further on. You'll be asking a lot of questions. I would hear not just the questions from you, but also to hear your thoughts. Not so long ago, the concept was amended. I will look up the exact name. So that was the strategy of the USA in terms of fighting cybercrime. When you read it, you understand that the government starts turning into a kind of a fortress, or, a steel ball with spikes all around. And they're saying, okay, try to make a cyber assault and we're going to bomb you. A similar notion could be applied to the concept of cybersecurity of Kazakhstan. It is called the cybersecurity concept, called the cyber shield of Kazakhstan. They built fortresses, they built steel spheres with spikes. In our concept, I wouldn't like to be like that. This is dividing, and internet is supposed to unite. So this is the message I have for you. Maybe some of you will be able to help or suggest alternatives. Instead of creating a shield, instead of isolating ourselves, we need to be saying, here we are, we're independent, and we won't be attacking anybody, but if you attack us, we're going to retaliate. Now we will be happy to hear your opinions and use the most interesting of them. Dear colleagues, this is really good news from the regulator talking about the strategy. We thought it would never happen, but it actually will. So that is very nice. And please accept the invitation of the regulator to express your opinions as to what this strategy is going to be looking like. So the electronic CV and the electronic population census are going to be just two pilot projects of the global complex of e-government in Belarus. Next is a representative of businesses. This is IAB Group Development Manager, Mr. Zolotukhin. Good day, dear colleagues. My name is Sergei Zolotukhin. I represent IAB Group, and I would like to tell you about the cybersecurity, about how IAB Group, that deals with preventing and investigating cybercrime. So I'll tell you how we see the underwater part of the iceberg, what trends we see, and how we think we need to develop further in such conditions. To talk about cyber threat. If we talk about cyber security as a phenomenon, what gets into the press and what we know about is only the tip of the iceberg. Because in fact, the crimes are designed and developed there underwater. And the idea of our activity is to get underwater and to see what's happening there and, if possible, prevent it. When we were starting out, there was no such term, but that was basically the threat intelligence, so-called cyber intelligence. So we were one of the first groups in the market that dealt with threat intelligence. We were getting data about who attacks, how they attack, the profiles of criminal groups and specific individuals. We discussed new hacking methods at the forums. We were searching for people who were able and willing to develop new attack means. So that type of activity that consisted in monitoring and supervising what was happening in the criminal community enabled us to be a bit preemptive in terms of what crimes are going to happen. So, as an example, What do you think? Can a cybercrime remain unnoticed? Of course it can, and I think that this can be happening anywhere at any moment. So here's the scheme of how a cyber attack was carried out against the systems of one of the banks. In September, a Trojan got into the network of the bank. From September to December, it evolved, infecting other PCs, and finally it got to the PC that dealt with stock exchange. And then in February, at the end of February, everything was okay, but the criminal group saw that the PC was left unattended, and then they placed several bets on the stock exchange market, and then it provoked some turbulence in the market, and there were sums of $500 million. And of course, this led to a huge loss with the bank. And when we started investigating, it turned out that these guys had been in the system of the bank for half a year by that point, and then we had to deal with that. So, of course, things happen, things change. 2017, the encryption virus epidemic. It turned out that it was not a problem of a bank or some specific organizations, but all of us can be subject to cyber threat, and it is and infrastructure suffers as well. So we may have damage to ticket purchase systems, to mobile connectivity systems, and so on. Information technologies are so much inherent to our society right now that we cannot deal with them, and if anything is disrupted, it has really massive effect. So recently, what we were speaking about for a long time, so the information became public about the governmentally controlled hacking groups like Stuxnet, Iranian system was attacked. Then there was a Korean group that attacked the SWIFT system and the banks to steal money. And in February 2018, the world stopped being the same. In February 2018, that was that scandal with the poisoning of Skripals in England, and for the first time it was mentioned that England reserves the right to carry out cyber attack against Russia. That was the first case when the experts, it wasn't the experts saying that this is theoretically possible, but when the cabinet of ministers said that we're going to do that. So, and there were several confirmations of that. So basically cyber attack became a tool of politics, just as the military force, bombs, diplomacy, anything else. I'm talking about banks here, just because the banks are the sphere that allow cyber threats to thrive. Banks are money. The money that is stolen from the bank is not spent on yachts or planes. Part of stolen money is invested in new developments. This is kind of international crime groups, which basically entails division of labor. Some people search for vulnerabilities. There is a second group who write the code. The third group attacks. The fourth group transfers the money. And so all those technologies are tested on the banks, and it helps attract new people into the criminal community, which is one of the problems. Those attacks against the banks, they put forth one more challenge. It is a challenge not just for a single state, but for the world community. And the final point. This is for all of us. Cybersecurity is not merely about governments or banks or industrial enterprises. Each and every one of them right now has a smartphone in their pocket. A good test. If you have in one pocket you have a smartphone, in another pocket you have your wallet. Which would you like to lose first? How many of you want to lose a smartphone and leave a wallet? How many of you want to lose the wallet but have a smartphone left? So there you go. There is already no clear priority which is more important. And again, for phishing and all of those attacks, all of that is rather unpleasant, I should say. So, look what's happening, and that's really disturbing. We speak about the new attacks, about the new methods, about the people who are in charge of information security. They are now in a situation that they are ready, that they will be attacked, and that the attack is likely to be successful. This is a very disturbing symptom when people in charge of cybersecurity are basically prepared to lose. It's the problem not for the antiviruses that protect not just as well as they used to, but this is a kind of a paradigm of information security problem which is no longer compliant with the global challenges. So it doesn't meet those requirements. You see that cybercrime started somewhere around 95, 96, and you see how the damage increases. You see, it's just WannaCry alone in 2017 caused damage of $1 billion, and the total damage in 2017 was $1 trillion. The whole defense paradigm is reactive. It reacts to the incidents. We detect the incident, we react to it, we define the plan of improvement, and so on. You're like a general who is fighting the war that's already over, because all of the antiviruses are based on detecting what has already happened instead of focusing on prevention. And what we need to focus on is not fighting the incidents, not just being ready for the incident. Of course, you have to be ready for that, but you need to do your best to prevent the incident, to change the concept, shifting the focus on prediction and prevention, on early communication, early alarm. If we know about the attack that's being prepared, if we know about it in advance, we'll be able to prevent it, to take measures to prevent it from happening or to prevent it from developing, or maybe take measures so that the critical incident either does not happen or is detected at the earliest stage possible so that we minimize the losses. So the whole idea of designing the system of early warning, it changes the paradigm of defense, and it shifts the focus from constant reaction to an attack. Instead, it allows the person who is in charge of security to look a bit forward. So to stop just being reactive, but rather being proactive. And this concerns the whole society. If you see the red arrows, that's the internet. That's internet of interaction. People pay to the banks, legal entities pay to the banks, people use the public services, the public portals, enterprises provide information about their activities, statistics, and other social parameters. All of that requires protection. You cannot just protect only enterprises, only the bank. That's the whole ecosystem of interactions. It has to get a decent level of protection. We will grow weary of reacting to every single incident, but technologies are in place already. And the point is that technologically the branch is ready. But the ones that are not ready are what we're not ready with is the understanding of what and when to do. Of course, there is a criminological experience when we do the case study of the recent cases and we adjust the security policy. Machine intelligence helps to identify some of the attacks that take place without signature, and so on. So we need to share experience. We need to have public and private partnership. In this respect, it is very important because it is the only effective way that will enable us to change the situation. Because, look, we have a lot of experience accumulated. This is experience in legal regulating. In neighboring countries, they also have it. We have the expertise from the experts who carry out investigations. We have data exchange. We heard today about how the internet is organized in different countries, in our post-Soviet countries, in Western countries, and so on. The exchange of information about the internet threats is an extremely important component of countering cybercrime. As an example, IB Group, even though the geopolitical situation is rather complicated, we are partners and exchange data with Europol, with Interpol, with OSCE. So we carry out the exchange. And we catch cybercriminals. We detained a cybercriminal in Belarus, though he received a suspended sentence. But still, so there are lawyers who develop their expertise. Law enforcement systems develop their expertise. We need to share that, and we need to work together. It only works that way. But my presentation would be incomplete if I only said that we need a new paradigm, like we have experience, we have technologies, and we need to change our views. In fact, right now, together with an insurance company, IAG, we launched a project on insuring cyber risks. So the users who get our equipment, they get insurance. And this is a rather different mechanism of hedging the risks, mitigating risks, mitigating the gravity of consequences. All the methods are good. Different approaches are fine, and they will allow us to effectively deal with problems, hedge it at the level of government, hedge it at the level of governments, at the level of communities, at the level of private individuals. So just to finish up my brief presentation, we will be continuing with that. On October 9th, 10th, we will have our conference, Cybercrime Con. We will share our experience from 2018, and we invite all of you here who would like to take a look at that to participate in the conference. So now I would like to wish you a cyber-safe present and future. And I would like to cite a certain letter. Dear colleagues, today I want to treat all of you to pizza because I cannot block my computer. This happened in our company. This was because we're very particular about cybersecurity within our company. And now one more of our employees got in a good lesson that cybersecurity is right here, right now. Thank you, dear colleagues.
Thank you, Sergey. Now let us give the floor to the next colleague. This is Deputy Head for Directorate for Investigation of Crimes in the Cybersecurity area. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. I'm the Deputy Head of the Directorate known as K-Directorate in the Republic of Belarus. Today, in my presentation, I'm going to briefly and understandably explain the status quo in the field of fighting against cyber crimes in the Republic of Belarus, and will also provide you some forecast for further developments. First and foremost, I would like to reiterate that the situation in Belarus and generally in other countries of the world shows evidently, with every evidence, that the world is transforming. New forms of interaction are appearing within the society, as well as among individuals and between the society and the state. The appearance of new information technologies results in the fact that in many cases certain vulnerabilities appear which are exploited by criminals in order to receive some benefits. These may be some financial considerations, or the criminals may also want to breach some information. Today, information is extremely important, and as you know, who has information, the person who has information rules the world. So having certain information and having certain data that can later compromise a individual, a citizen, or an entire organization, an entire entity, be that a financial or public one, may result in serious financial losses. Speaking about the tendencies that are currently observed in our country, I would like to underscore that the law enforcement agencies are following the developments and presently have already exerted certain efforts in three main directions. The first one is the formation of professionally literate corps. Presently, in all the regions, specialized departments for fighting against cyber crimes are established. The personnel receive commensurate and ample training required for execution of their daily objectives in the course of investigative activities. The second thing is the harmonization of legal acts. My colleague has already raised the issue of information security, and we're currently developing this concept. I hope that soon it'll be published and come into effect. So I would like to say that the ministry considers this activity as a priority. Certainly, we also introduce certain amendments to the criminal code. Thirdly, I would like to outline the importance of international cooperation, because cyber crime itself also is characterized by a well-developed organized structure. We often face situations when criminals perform criminal activities in the territory of our country, at the same time being outside of the territory of Belarus. A reverse organization of criminal attacks also is often observed. And as a result, the law enforcement agencies of different countries understand that only by joining and uniting their efforts, they could tackle cyber crimes. As you know, cyber crimes do not observe any borders, and cyber criminals do not have to perform to exert serious efforts in order to cross the borders, to penetrate the borders of any given state. I'd like to share with you the data for the 20th of August 2018, which would give you a good insight into the situation which is currently observed. So here is the data. Here are the data. 69% is the growth of cases when some equipment was stolen with the use of computer equipment. Let us proceed to the questions and answers a bit later. Plus 175.3% is a growth in incidents of breaches and hackings. Such activities are covered by the criminal code, and we can see some major growth. Certainly there are some cybercrimes that we currently do not know about. And by joining our efforts together with the public sector and the private sector, as well as some experts and the academia, we can identify all the risks that are associated with cybersecurity. Normally, attacks are targeted and normally are aimed at some larger audience rather than single individuals. Speaking about the forecast, I have some brief statistics for you that I have split in accordance with different directions of our activities. The criminal activities that are within the competence of the K Directorate of the Republic of Belarus are including the cases when stealings with the use of computer equipment as well as breaches of information. Here we may also identify the illegal use of banking cards, which can be countered by the awareness-raising activities and a range of different events. So recently we have come up to the understanding that it is not reasonable to write down your PIN code on the banking card. So with all this in mind, why are we speaking about some negative statistics? Recently, such criminal acts are characterized as domestic crimes, and the importance of such criminal activities is currently reduced, so we hope that it will be minimized in future. Speaking about the appearance of new ways of countering cybercrimes, we are actually witnessing the development of new types of interaction between the members of the society. So, given the growth in the number of such forms and techniques, we shall probably witness more cases when crimes are performed with the use of banking cards and digital technologies. Today, every technology is characterized by certain vulnerabilities. So, speaking about those, I would like to first and foremost underscore that the law enforcement agencies are interested in minimizing the harm that can be arising from such activities. This can be done jointly with the banking sector and all other relevant stakeholders. So we are standing for eliminating the opportunities for crimes at the very start, and the money accumulated at the accounts of citizens and banks should stay where they are supposed to be, and so we are doing our best to ensure the proper movements of those assets and money. Speaking about the digital crimes, today the illegal activities, including cases of embezzlement that are registered in the Republic of Belarus and that are related to the use of cryptocurrencies, are characterized as fraudulent activities. Here I mean the purchase of tokens through which criminals steal the asset and steal the money of citizens. So this should also be taken into account. Speaking about the 31st article of the Criminal Code, which covers for the computer information related crimes, this notion, well, this area is currently exploited by criminals through breaches of information, and today law enforcement agencies are at the forefront of the struggle against the hackers, because protection of banking data of every given citizen, protection of his account, protection of his messages is one of the top priorities for the law enforcement agencies. I mean the preservation of these data as well as their non-disclosure. All of that is the priority in the investigative activities of the law enforcement agencies of Belarus. Another field of our activity is quite specific, or it may seem quite specific. It is a sabotage, which is about deliberate blocking and elimination of data stored by computer systems and networks. So today, the targeted attacks that happened in 2017 and 2018 with every clarity show that such crimes did take place and they are committed today as well. Mostly they exploit different vulnerabilities of the systems, and I would like to reiterate that today along with development of all the relations between the state and the society, such crimes may occur in future as well. Another issue is the use of malware. This is actually a buzzword for everyone, and we know that malware is here to stay and is going to develop and evolve over time. So new types of introducing malware will appear, certainly. So in the Republic of Belarus, there are incidents of detection of spreading of malware, spreading of viruses, as well as drafting viruses, and also the activities that are related to the breach of information are performed from the outside of the Republic of Belarus. So basically that's it. I try to be very concise and brief. So I try to give you an insight into the status quo and the forecast that we are making with regard to this type of crimes. Thank you very much for attention. We're ready to answer to your questions, should you have any, but we should probably give the floor to the next speaker, who is the representative of the investigative committee, the senior investigator of the Directorate for the crimes in the field of information technologies. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alexey Polishuk. I'm the senior investigator of the Directorate for Crimes Against Intellectual Property of the General Directorate of the Investigative Committee of the Republic of Belarus. One of the main objectives of our directorate is the prevention of cybercrimes. We take all legal actions in order to prevent criminal activities. Along with development of internet technologies and other networks, criminals have seen the increasing opportunities for committing certain crimes. You can see this scheme which is used by cyber criminals for committing certain acts. Well, actually, all schemes are quite unique, and every year we witness something new cropping up. And speaking about the prevention, we can speak here about two levels, macro and micro level. So these activities are implemented at the level of the government, at the level of organizations, and at the level of individuals. So all in all, there are three levels. Speaking about the first level, the investigative committee, as well as other law enforcement agencies, exert every effort in order to improve the legislation and keep up with the latest developments and to regulate certain activities, as well as to borrow some of the best practices from foreign states. We also change the legislation and stimulate entities and individuals, both materially as well as through introduction of certain sanctions, so that organizations and individuals should take actions aimed at introduction of cybersecurity means, be that software and hardware, in their activities. Particularly, the investigative committee continuously cooperates with different organizations, not only within the framework of investigations, but also within the frame of different conferences. Soon, one of the conferences will be organized by the National Bank. So there we're going to discuss all the banking-related issues that are within the interests of the investigative committee. Speaking about the second level, Belarus has recently faced the problem of cybersecurity in 2016. However, the world has faced this very problem in 2014 and 2018. In 2018, the activities of Cobalt were terminated. As a result of the activities of the organized criminal group called Karbanaka Cobalt, huge losses were incurred by the banking sector. Certainly, we managed to detain some of the criminals participating in the activities of this group. However, the core is still free. Some of them have been detained in Spain, as far as I know. But the problem is as follows. Whenever you communicate with an organization or some providers or banking institutions, the main problems that we deal with are the financial ones, which means that the organizations have the financial benefits of as the top priority that they pursue, so they don't waste their money on some cyber protection software or hardware, and they consider their losses as regular and necessary losses. But whenever we ask them some question about their reputation, they tend to be nervous and overreactive, and they are really confused whenever they asked to come up with some response to their reputation-related problems. In Europe or the United States of America, entities understand that investment of $1 in the cybersecurity brings some 4 or 5 or even more US dollars of benefits, because this protects them against cyber attacks, embezzlement, thievery of personal data, and so on and so forth. Other issues that can serve as a good example include the WannaCry virus, the NotPetya, Bad Rabbit, and others. In fact, the activities of these viruses and their spreading around organizations was attributed to the fact that many organizations did not invest their money into cybersecurity means and did not cooperate with law enforcement agencies. They would not notify some law enforcement agencies about the effects of DOS attacks faced by them. So at the same time, whenever the entities detect certain criminal activities and certain DOS attacks, they can immediately inform the law enforcement agencies on that fact, which could save such organizations. However, this is often neglected, and as a result, huge losses are borne. Often we are called and told that some organization has a WannaCry virus blocking the entire database, and as a result they cannot restore it. So they are thinking about paying or not paying the authors of this virus. We always encourage entities to inform us on such practices. But how did viruses penetrate their structure? Nobody trained the personnel, nobody trains the staff, nobody invests money into purchasing specialized cybersecurity software. Another problem is the level of individuals, because citizens very often allow others to penetrate their systems and steal their data of their banking cards and their accounts, and they do not know how to protect themselves. So we, as the Investigative Committee and the Ministry of Internal Affairs, exert efforts in order to inform the population about some problems and the ways and techniques to protect themselves, as well as about the activities that are carried out by criminals with the aim of stealing the information from computers, smartphones, and so on and so forth. As an option, we recommend that starting from the age of 7 years, children should be trained and pass some cybersecurity courses. Why are we focused on children? In the course of our activities, as I have seen many times, we observe cases of pedophilia in the internet, and very often children are blackmailed, and so there is a logical question appearing: how can this happen? Did parents inform their children on their cybersecurity means or not? So that is the question. I can give you one more example, which is not quite related to the internet, but is related to the prevention of crimes. So this brings us back to the issue of pedophilia. There was a case when a mother taught her son that he should never be approached by strangers, and that whenever he's approached by strangers, he should immediately contact the law enforcement agencies.
Eventually, it helped because when the bad thing actually happened, the kid was prepared to the fact that they could be molested by older men, so everything ended up fine, and currently the offender is imprisoned, but it shows how important it is to provide early, step-by-step education for everybody so that they know what kind of threats there are. Most of you have no idea what threats there are and what actions criminals may take. So, on our part, we're ready to participate in conferences, and we're ready to speak about the problematic aspects that emerge when investigating the cases and when working with some specific organizations. The investigation committee is open for dialogue with everybody else, and we'll be happy to help everybody. Of course, partially this decreases the number of the amount of work we have to do. The number of cybercrimes increases from year to year, and if we don't pay attention to that, just as regular organizations, we will suffer from cybercrimes. Somebody is going to burn the midnight oil at work because they will be expecting the attack, and somebody will have to recover the information stolen or damaged by the criminals. Using my position as a moderator, I would like to expand a bit on a couple of points that are interesting for me, and after that we'll give a chance for you to ask questions. We have representatives of the regulator here. Evgeny, a question to you. So there is a strategy of information security. Hopefully it will be finalized and we'll see the light of the day at some point. The question is when. And there is another question. This is the law on data. As representative of the regulator, what do you think? Maybe there is already a body that will be in charge of everything that concerns personal data, or how long will it take to determine that type of body? Thank you so much for that unexpected question. Fortunately, we are not exactly in charge of personal data. We participate only in terms of technical protection of data. But, of course, given what people are here, yeah, I understand that we're the only ones who have to deal with that. So I'll say a couple of words and then I'll try to forward that question to the audience. The approach that was announced in the law on personal data is just the general European approach, general European values. And there it is written, we have a term, special authorized body. In our state, we will have to even, let's say, to use that a little bit differently, we typically say the specially authorized public body. And they say specially authorized body. And now there are debates as to who is going to be that. So maybe that would be the Ministry of Information or the Operation and Analysis Center. They even thought it might be the prosecutor's office. It is still not regulated. In the law, everything is written that the President of the Republic of Belarus has yet to determine that. But since we're sticking to a European approach, we would like it to be not a public agency, or at least not our center, for that matter. Okay, let's try to get going a bit. Maybe some of you have a different opinion. Yes, yes. Wonderful. Let's listen to any other opinion. We will have to deal with that at any point, at some point in the future anyway. Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Sergei Varankevich. I'm the Director of Data Privacy Office. It happened so that this question touches me personally very much because I was researching the independence of supervisory bodies in terms of personal data protection, and I absolutely agree with you, Evgeny, meaning that the approach that would ensure that our country be recognized as the one providing good protection of personal data, so the only approach that would provide for that would be involving maybe a public but an independent supervisory body that would be regulating both the business community that processes a lot of large amounts of personal data, and also the body that would be regulating the activities of the governmental agencies that process a lot of personal data, even much more than those other ones. So we will, of course, need the unified system of keeping records of the population and so on. So basically what we need is that the independent body supervise not only the traditional regulation objects, but also the public agencies and institutions. And for that, we would definitely mean a certain level of independence and autonomy. Belarus has a similar experience in terms of protecting consumer rights, where the function of the agency is performed in terms of supervising, is performed by public agencies on consumer rights protection. Maybe this kind of Soviet-style experience will come in handy when creating an independent agency that, on the one hand, would be not business related, so it wouldn't have any vested interest. And on the other hand, that would represent the society in terms of protecting personal data of all the citizens of the Republic of Belarus, especially when the data is being processed by public agencies. This is a debatable question, and it is far from being well worked out. But it is good that the representatives of the public agencies realize that the problem is there, and I am happy to hear that the civilized approach is considered as the most probable. Thank you. Thank you very much for your response. In my small speech, I left out the word independent to see how well the audience is prepared. Exactly so. In European legislation, it is special, authorized, independent body. In our case, we don't have the word independent. You see, I either have to hold it too close or it is inconvenient to speak. Here, in the draft law, we have the special authorized body. There, they have special authorized independent body. Now, thank you for your questions, and I will provide some more input. I would like to have another comment to the point of data protection. Oh, you're from Russia, right? Yeah, you definitely should have that special supervisory body. It sounds very nice in terms of the recent scandal. So, of course, the European vector with that GDPR, we don't speak about the rights, we speak about the data. And in fact, I think the best approach is when there is a prosecutor's office that deals with protecting the rights alongside law enforcement agencies. And the protection of data is within the competence of the specialists who deal with data. Okay, so Sergei Pavalishev, I have to comply. I'm the moderator. My authority is not so strong as yours. So, you touched upon the document, the strategy of national cybersecurity. Could you please tell us, will this document be in the open access or will it be classified? Further on, Just very short questions. Yes, 36 seconds to answer. The document was developed by the operational and analytical center, or other stakeholders were also attracted? That's question 2. And question 3, if to talk about the authorized service providers and PPP, we've touched upon that. Will this public-private partnership continue in that question? Thank you. I will be happy to answer your question. I'm the only victim right now. I hope my colleagues will switch the focus of their attacks. So, for the first question, the answer is the document is going to be open so that our community can take a look and the international community can also say what they think. Second question, it was developed by a working group with a lot of public agency representatives, including Ministry of the Interior, including our center. Well, our center contributed a lot, but it's not the headliner, so to say. We are just plain participants in developing that document. And this is called not strategy, but concept. The third question is, I, as the head of division that has to deal with authorized service providers, I don't see any point in changing the approach. If I may make a certain addendum to it, to talk about the concept of information security. So there are a number of stakeholders participating in developing, like the Ministry of the Interior, and I have to say that when I was speaking about that, I was only talking about some narrow characteristics of cybercrime. In fact, cybercrime is much more global. So we spoke about pedophilia. Yes, pedophiles enter the internet, and it's easier for them to communicate with the young people. There, they can be anybody. They can hide behind a fake account, and after that, they can commit crimes all they want. And drugs are also sold via the internet these days. If we talk about economic crimes, like bribery, bribery as such also takes place online. For example, money is transferred to an anonymous virtual wallet. So virtual security, the concept of information security, will have a whole section dedicated to cybercrime. So there is a certain difference between the concept and the strategy. Concept is the idea of something that has to be in place in our country so that every individual and every person is safe on all fronts. So regulatory bodies also have to take part in that. Dear colleagues, now we're switching to questions from the audience. Sergei did it very appropriately. He introduced himself and he said who he was asking. So I'm from Human Constanta, the human rights organizations. It's very nice that we shifted from personal data to cybersecurity, because we'll have something to discuss at the previous session, at the next session, I'm sorry. But the question is about the cybersecurity. So, as the focus of effort of the business, state, and the civil society. In this concept, is there a place for civil society, and what kind of place there is? That's a question to people who know the text of the draft document. The second question is also short. Will there be a broad public discussion of this document before it turns into a law? I haven't read it, so I'm passing the floor to those who have. Okay, so I'll start from the second part, the broad discussion. This question was voiced during the sessions of the working group. Preliminarily, the answer is yes. This question, this project is rather quite raw, and when the concept is fully developed, since it's not going to be classified, it's going to go through public debate, and we, as the developers of this document will be happy to see a certain amount of criticism. The second question, well, you read and you will see there's a lot of attention paid to specifically the role of society in cybersecurity, starting from what my colleague have said, starting from informing the society and educating the society. All of those questions are very well described in a couple of pages. Questions? My name is Vladimir. I am representing the Ministry of the Interior. So there is a certain statistic, so we could think about growth in cybercrime. The problem I want to ask is, in fact, we have limited specialists, limited technologies. So the first question was about the detection and about all those incidents and prevention. Now, the second question is, of course, mostly we have human resources. At any university, we don't have any specialized chair. So no specialists dealing with information security. So there is no such major, not in any university. The courses of professional development at the Radio Technical University, it's also not nice. So at all universities, there are fewer than 5 specialists of a similar nature at any university. Now the question is, how are you going to get training and how are you going to resolve all that? If we take the Belarusian State University of Informatics and Radio Electronics, there's just only 1 chair. Okay, in the region, the situation is similar. So we only have a couple of PhDs all over the country that deal with that question. And the third question, the European games have arrived. So GDPR, May 2018. Insurance processor, regulator, and so on. We will have cards and we will have claims, mostly insurance and reimbursement. Like, how are we going to regulate that if we don't even have a law about personal data? We don't even have a notion of personal data. So we're going to have biometry, video surveillance, and the passports. We're still working on the concept. Concept is like the first year at university. When are we going to graduate?
Well, it's better to be at the first course, so to say, and to have some general concepts at least. So, well, in the investigative committee, our director in particular continuously organizes trainings for investigators who deal with crimes in the field of high tech, as well as crimes against underage individuals and crimes related to sales of narcotic substances. We organize lectures and seminars and so on and so forth. Yes, indeed, we're working very slowly and the progress is very slow, but we're lobbying this problem all the time because we are witnessing the criminals shifting into the virtual reality, and probably the murders will be happening online very soon. Today we have the so-called case of blue whales, which is related to forcing individuals into suicide, and this is a relevant issue for us. It's quite relevant for our directorate in particular. In our directorate, out of 10 specialists, none has graduated from the Belarusian State University of Informatics and Radio Electronics. So they are mostly have a major in economy or the legal specialists and so on and so forth. So we do some self-education And yes, indeed, those lectures that we are delivering are not enough. So this question is included into the agenda, and everyone understands with every clarity the acuteness of this problem. I don't know how can we satisfy the so-called staff hunger or hunger for highly qualified employees. But today, many of the countries are already establishing some specialized departments for investigation of high-tech crimes, and these departments provide help to other departments and help them to investigate crimes that may be related to thievery or embezzlement with the use of informational technologies. As for the methodological assistance, we do provide it as well. As for the training and education in the Academy of Internal Affairs, we also organize some courses, although they are not sufficient in terms of the time spent on them and the range of topics touched within their frame. But we're also trying to lobby this problem because we have double workload. We, on the one hand, are busy with investigating, but on the other hand, we're also providing some methodological support. So in the regional directorates, we have established departments for investigation of crimes in the field of narcotics and cybersecurity, because today we have the drug dealers shifting into the digital technologies, and physical transfer in narcotic no longer takes place. I would like to come up with a comment on behalf of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. There are certain issues that you have underscored, and nothing stands still today. The progress is ongoing, and in order to follow all the trends, in order to be on the ball, so to say, and to keep up with the trends, we should naturally understand the structure and specificity of all the crimes that are carried out in the field of IT and high tech. So the Republic of Belarus is not the only country to hold specialized courses under the aegis and support of the Council of Europe. Armenia also has similar courses in place. These courses will be organized on a permanent basis for the investigative committee. We also visit our colleagues from the US and borrow their best practices. Speaking about the methodological support, we try to follow all the existing trends and threats and menaces and prepare methodological recommendations that will further on serve as the guidelines in the regions. And all of us clearly understand that people having certain skills and knowledge today, when they retire, they finally have rich life experience, and very often serious and high-profile organizations are interested and willing to employ them because they have a lot of experience to contribute. So employees with huge experience never join the academic community, and instead they're interested in the financial matters, in the financial side of the question. So they, so to say, reinforce our existing structures. But we can see that, and we try to focus on it. We try to tailor our experience and skills to their transfer to the younger generation, and are focused on detection of cybercrimes. Let me make a short comment. I'd like to say a few words about the academic nature of our education. Unfortunately, starting from the third grade, we have our students and school children taught by students, actually. Meanwhile, cyber crimes are developing at a pace which is many times faster than the pace of development of academic programs. So how much time does it take to develop an academic program? 20 years ago, at the end of the 90s. As you can remember, the cybersecurity included an antivirus, a ciphering tool, a window curtain, and that's it. However, today the situation has changed drastically, and today we are discussing some preventive activities and clear detection of crimes before they actually take place. So within 20 years, sweeping changes have taken place. So today we need to discuss all the practices and the transfer of the practical experience to the younger generation.
Очень был обширный вопрос.
There was one issue that was related to the 4 components. I believe next time I should make some notes. So this question was called very acute. I mean the academic nature of our training and education. Can you please tell me frankly, if a student joins your enterprise as a student is employed by your entity, do you consider him as a specialist, or do you have to train him and to further develop his professional excellence? Well, you can teach a student to have some basic understanding and to operate some software, to write the code. That's all clear, but we should also determine the strategic and tactical steps that are to be made. And we need to foresee the potential trends in future. Based on that, we need to develop the legal framework and further on draft some programs and compile some complexes. We have one of the key principles, which is the consistency. In my department, particularly, a number of employees believe that we don't need lieutenants at all. What we need is individuals who already have the experience, who have shaped their vision of the reality, who have accumulated practical skills that we can start working with, that can be used for transfer of the experience. So only after a person has spent 2 or 3 years in the department, we admit them to some serious projects. As for protection of personal data, as you have said, yes, indeed, we don't have a corresponding legislation, but we have 2 definitions of personal data in our legal framework, and those are included into Edict 196 as a part of the law on informatization and data protection. So naturally, personal data include Edict 196, and this piece of legislation has a definition of different classes of information systems, as well as those related to personal data. So we are actually going to use the same system during the 2nd European Games. Speaking about the transborder data transmission, I should say that, yes, indeed, we have our own coding, our ciphering tools, and very few countries have their own cryptography data protection means. During the 2nd European Games, we are ready to perform certain experiments, and we will not insist on the use of Belarusian cryptography. And probably, instead, we will also allow to use some other algorithms and mechanisms. So that's it, and I can assure you that we will ensure the required protection during the 2nd European Games. Any other questions, dear colleagues? Well, if there are no questions, no, we have one. I would like to make one comment. So imagine if you have some toothache, and there are 2 doctors in your village, for example, a vet and a dentist. So the question is who you are going to address with this problem. Vladimir, using the rights of the moderator, I'd like to ask you to address this question a bit later. Well, look, Vladimir, using the rights of the moderator, I failed to interrupt you, but thank you for your question. Well, look, you said that we have weak law enforcement and we have insufficient education, but I can say the same about businesses, and I can say the same about the public sector as well, because I don't know a single enterprise which has secure perimeter and highly trained individuals and the required software. I can name you several banks that can rank as protected ones, but they're very few. So we can successfully fight against cybercrimes only jointly and together by uniting our efforts. And today many banks are closing some of the vulnerabilities, but the social engineering is flourishing, and it's hard to say how to protect ourselves against the socially engineered attacks, because people themselves deliberately transfer their personal data. And this is the level that was mentioned by Alexei. I mean, the personal discipline and personal hygiene, so to say, of our users. So these are the only principles that will allow us to curb cyber crimes. There was one more question. Good afternoon. I'm a student of the third course of Belarusian State University of Informatics and Radio Electronics. My major is data protection, and I'm on third year, so I have already studied for 3 years, and I'm really interested in this topic. And I have the following problem. All the information related to information security includes a couple of legal acts, and that's it, basically. Well, the rest you need to find yourself. And all the literature that is dedicated to the topic is only in the English language, and no one cares about that. So I'm on the third year, and if I didn't know English, I wouldn't know anything absolutely with regard to this topic. So you need to be on the ball. You need to understand what the existing techniques are. So you need to know the English language. So, well, actually, that's the essence of the problem. And this is the problem which is typical for the entire educational system and its IT component. Today, there are several stakeholders, including the High Technologies Park, who are establishing a new program of an open university. So this is a university where the educational programs will be tailored by the people who are currently employed by the EPAM or Wargaming and many other companies. So in fact, this will be a number of people who will be recruited to the previously defined positions. And these specialists will have a clear understanding of the way the IT processes should be supported. As for information security, it accounts for some 10 or 15% of all the IT professions. And here you need to understand whether a person is interested in information security at all. So we have brought up the problem of the material factor here, because the information security sector brings less finance, brings less revenues than the general IT sector. So our students are not focused on information security, but they're mostly focused on goods and software programs that will be exported. So that's a serious problem for the Republic of Belarus.
Если вопросы еще какие-то есть?
If there are some other questions, we are ready to respond to them. But anyway, we're ready to participate in discussions. We're ready to engage in the conversation. So you can ask your questions by the sidelines. Thank you for your participation.